It was just another ordinary day for Emily Dawson, or so everyone thought. She walked through the big glass doors of Crestwood Corporation, her small brown bag of lunch tucked under her arm. Her steps were light, almost silent, as she moved across the cold, shiny office floor. Around her, people rushed past, talking loudly on their phones, laughing at jokes she wasn't a part of. Nobody looked at Emily. Nobody greeted her. To them, she was just Emily, the quiet girl who sat in the corner. The one who worked behind the scenes. The one who never got credit for her ideas. The one everyone ignored. But Emily had a secret. A secret that could change everything. The office at Crestwood was huge rows of desks, tall glass windows, and important-looking people in expensive suits. The air smelled like coffee and printer ink, and there was a constant hum of ringing phones and clicking keyboards. Emily's desk? It wasn't in the middle of the office where the important people sat. It wasn't near the windows with the beautiful view of the city skyline. It was in the far back, squeezed between a broken printer and a tall, metal filing cabinet. Nobody ever came back there. The printer had been broken for weeks, but no one bothered to fix it. The cabinet was covered in dust because the office cleaner barely stopped by. The air felt stale, and the lights flickered sometimes. But Emily didn't complain. She liked her little corner. It kept her away from them. Especially Jeff Matthews. Jeff was the manager of Emily's department. He had a big office with glass walls, a leather chair that looked too expensive, and a smug grin that never left his face. He was the kind of guy who snapped his fingers when he wanted something. The kind of guy who talked over people in meetings, making sure his voice was always the loudest. The kind of guy who thought he was smarter than everyone else. But the truth? Jeff wasn't as smart as he thought. Emily had seen it over and over again. He took credit for other people's ideas. He nodded and pretended to understand things he didn't. He bullied his way through problems instead of solving them. And worst of all? He ignored Emily completely. "Emily, print this," he would say, tossing papers onto her desk without looking at her. "Emily, make sure this report is correct. Emily, get me some coffee." Never a please. Never a thank you. To Jeff, Emily wasn't a person. She was just a tool. And the rest of the office? They followed his lead. If someone needed help, they dropped their work on Emily's desk. If something went wrong, they expected Emily to fix it. But when it was time to celebrate a success, when Jeff got praised for a project well done, Emily's name was never mentioned. Not once. She could have walked out of the office that day, and nobody would have noticed. Or at least, that's what they thought. Because soon, something would happen. Something that would make them see Emily Dawson in a way they never had before. Something that would change everything. And for the first time, they would regret underestimating her. A closer look at Crestwood Corporation. Crestwood Corporation was a big company, but it wasn't just the size that made it important. It was the kind of company that controlled things. Governments made deals with them. Billionaires invested in them. They weren't just selling products, they were selling power. And yet, inside this giant empire, there were people like Emily, invisible, ignored, forgotten. Emily had spent 6 months working in this office, watching the same patterns play out. The same people rose to the top. The same people were pushed aside. And every day, she told herself she didn't care. But deep down, she did. Because Emily Dawson knew something they didn't. She knew that powerful people fall the hardest. The first time Jeff had messed up, Emily had covered for him. It had been a small mistake, some wrong numbers in a report. Nothing major. But if the big boss had seen it, Jeff would have been in trouble. So Emily had fixed it before anyone noticed. And Jeff? He never said thank you. He just assumed she had done what she was supposed to do. And from that day on, Jeff stopped checking his work. He got sloppy. He left things unfinished, knowing Emily would handle it. He made promises he couldn't keep, knowing Emily would figure it out. But what Jeff didn't know, was that Emily had stopped cleaning up his messes. She was just watching now. Waiting. Letting him dig his own grave. The office buzzed with excitement that morning. Something big was happening. People were whispering in the halls. Emails were being sent back and forth. Meetings were being cancelled and rescheduled. Emily just sat at her desk, listening. She had already seen the emails. She had already read the documents. And she already knew the truth. Jeff Matthews was about to fail. And this time? Nobody was going to save him. Not even Emily. At exactly 10 a.m., the entire department gathered in the big conference room. Jeff sat at the head of the table, smiling like he owned the world. His expensive watch gleamed under the bright lights. His perfect suit had not a single wrinkle. He thought today was his big moment. But Emily? She knew better. Because in just a few minutes, everything was going to fall apart. And Jeff Matthews was going to realize who Emily Dawson really was. Emily Dawson, the invisible worker. Emily was used to being ignored. At Crestwood Corporation, she was just another employee, just another face in the crowd. She had been working there for 6 months, but to most people, it was like she didn't exist. People walked past her desk without saying hello. They talked over her in meetings like her words didn't matter. When she sent emails with good ideas, nobody replied. But later, she would hear those same ideas in meetings coming from someone else's mouth. And the worst part? Nobody gave her credit. But Emily was not angry. She was watching. She was listening. She was learning. Because one day, they were going to see the truth. One day, they wouldn't be able to ignore her anymore. Jeff Matthews, the office bully. If there was one person who made sure Emily stayed invisible, it was Jeff Matthews. Jeff was the manager of her department. He walked around the office like he was a king and everyone else was beneath him. He snapped his fingers when he wanted something. He interrupted people when they talked. He acted like he was smarter than everyone else. But Emily knew the truth. Jeff wasn't smart. He wasn't talented. He was just loud. And he had one skill: taking credit for other people's work. The coffee incident. One morning, Emily was at her desk, typing up a report that was not her job. Jeff had thrown a stack of papers on her desk an hour ago and said, "Fix this." "I don't have time." "No please." "No thank you." "Just orders." Emily sighed and started working. She was used to it. Just then, Jeff walked past with his big cup of coffee. He was talking to another manager, laughing loudly. And then, splash! The coffee spilled all over Emily's desk. The papers were soaked. Her keyboard was wet. The hot liquid dripped onto her lap. Jeff stopped laughing for a second. "Oh," he said, looking at the mess. Emily grabbed some napkins and started cleaning up. She expected Jeff to apologize. To offer to help. But instead, he just laughed. "Be careful next time, Dawson," he said, smirking. Then he walked away. Emily's hands tightened into fists. But she didn't say a word. Not yet. Later that day, Emily had to sit through a long, boring meeting. It was about an important project that she had worked on. She had spent weeks gathering data, making reports, and organizing everything. But when Jeff stood up to present the project, he didn't mention her name. Not once. Instead, he acted like he had done all the work. He smiled and talked confidently, pointing at charts and numbers that Emily had put together. And when the bosses clapped and told Jeff, "Great job," he just grinned and said, "Thank you." Emily sat in her chair, staring at her hands. This wasn't the first time. But it would be the last. The power of silence. Emily never yelled. She never argued. She never fought back. She just waited. She waited while Jeff ignored her ideas. She waited while he stole credit. She waited while the office overlooked her again and again. Because Emily knew something they didn't. She wasn't just a quiet girl in the corner. She wasn't just a worker nobody noticed. She was smarter than all of them. She had been watching. She had been learning. And very soon, she was going to change everything. The mistake that changed everything. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Jeff had a big meeting with the company's top executives. It was about a deal worth millions of dollars. If it went well, Jeff would get a huge promotion. The only problem? Jeff didn't understand the numbers. He had skipped the hard work. He had ignored Emily's emails. He had pretended to know everything. And now? He was going to fail. Emily knew it. And this time, she wasn't going to save him. She just sat at her desk, waiting. Because in just a few minutes, Jeff Matthews was going to realize something very important. Something he had never understood before. Emily Dawson was not invisible. And she was not to be underestimated. Emily's silent observations. Jeff thought he had everything under control. He walked around the office like a king, acting like he was the smartest person in the room. He gave orders, took credit for other people's work, and laughed at his own bad jokes. But what he didn't realize. Emily was paying attention. She saw things no one else noticed. She listened when people thought she wasn't there. She read every email carefully, even the ones others ignored. And little by little, she was putting the pieces together. Something big was coming. And soon, the tables would turn. The missing numbers. One afternoon, Emily was at her desk, double-checking a report Jeff was supposed to present. It was a financial report for an important project. If there was a mistake, it could cost the company millions. Emily had already learned one thing about Jeff: he never checked his work. So, she did. And that's when she saw it. The numbers didn't add up. At first, she thought maybe it was a small mistake. Maybe someone had typed the wrong number. But the more she looked, the worse it got. Money was missing. A lot of money. Emily's hands tightened around the paper. She knew what this meant. If Jeff turned in this report, the bosses would find out. And when they did, Jeff would be in big trouble. The accidental email. Emily had a choice to make. She could stay quiet. Or she could let Jeff fall. She thought about all the times he had stolen her ideas. All the times he had ignored her, laughed at her, treated her like she was nothing. And then, without even thinking, she did something small. Something that would change everything. She sent an email. Not a big email. Not an email that would get her in trouble. Just a small one. She forwarded the report to the company's finance department with a simple message. Hey, I noticed something strange in the numbers. Can you double check? Then she sat back and waited. The storm begins. The next day, Emily noticed something strange. People were whispering in the hallways. Managers were walking around with worried looks on their faces. Something was wrong. And then, bang! Jeff slammed his office door. His face was red. His hands were shaking. He grabbed his phone and started shouting into it. Emily smiled just a little. The finance department had found the mistake. And now, Jeff was in trouble. Jeff's panic. All day, Jeff was running around, trying to fix things. He called people into his office. He blamed other employees. He even tried to say it was just a small mistake. But the problem was too big to ignore. And the best part? Nobody knew Emily had sent the email. She was still the quiet girl in the corner. The one nobody noticed. But she wasn't just watching anymore. She was pulling the strings. The forgotten document. That night, as Emily was getting ready to leave, she saw something interesting. Jeff's office door was open. And inside, sitting right on his desk, was a folder. A very important folder. Emily glanced around. The office was almost empty. Jeff was in a meeting, probably trying to save himself. Slowly, she walked inside. She picked up the folder and flipped through the pages. And that's when she saw it. Proof. Proof that Jeff had been hiding things. Proof that he had been changing numbers to make himself look good. Proof that he was lying to the company. Emily's heart pounded. This was bigger than she thought. This wasn't just about a mistake. This was about fraud. And if she played her cards right, Jeff wasn't just going to lose his job. He was going to lose everything. Emily's secret plan. Emily had always been patient. She never rushed things. She never acted out of anger. She just waited for the right moment. And now, she had it. Holding the folder in her hands, she took a deep breath. Then, she did something simple. She made a copy. She put the folder back exactly where she found it. And then, she walked out of the office like nothing had happened. The final pieces. Over the next few days, things in the office started to change. More whispers. More meetings behind closed doors. More people looking at Jeff like they didn't trust him anymore. Jeff was starting to notice. And he was getting desperate. Emily could see it in his eyes. The way he looked over his shoulder. The way he snapped at employees. The way his hands shook when he typed emails. He knew something was wrong. He just didn't know who was behind it. Emily sat at her desk, typing quietly, pretending she had no idea what was happening. But inside, she was smiling. Because soon, Jeff Matthews was going to learn the truth. And when he did, it would be too late. The day everything changed. The air in the office was heavy, full of whispers and tension. It had been weeks since Emily had first noticed something off about Jeff's financial report. Since then, the secret had been building, quietly, like a storm waiting to break. Now, everything was coming to a head. The company's biggest meeting of the year was scheduled for that afternoon. Executives, managers, and clients would be in the room, all gathered to discuss a project that would make or break the company's future. It was the moment Jeff had been waiting for. The moment he believed would secure his promotion to the top, the moment he would show everyone how important he was. But what Jeff didn't know was that Emily was about to turn everything upside down. Underscore 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 un. Jeff's last moments of control. Jeff paced back and forth in his office. He kept checking his watch, looking at his phone. His fingers tapped nervously against his desk. For the past few days, he had been sweating under the pressure of the mistakes he had made. The finance team was still investigating the missing money, and the higher UPS had started to question his decisions. But today was supposed to be the day he saved himself. Just stick to the plan, he muttered to himself, adjusting his tie. He was going to present the project in front of the bosses and convince them that everything was fine. He had a good story prepared. No one would be the wiser. The mistakes would be covered up, and he would walk out of the meeting with his promotion. He looked in the mirror, trying to calm his nerves. He took a deep breath. Today would be his day. Underscore 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 un. Emily's quiet preparation. While Jeff was busy with his nerves, Emily was busy with her own plans. She had been preparing for this moment in silence, observing everything, waiting for the right time to act. She knew this meeting was coming, and she knew it would be the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth. The time was right. She had spent weeks gathering evidence. She had carefully looked through Jeff's reports, emails, and even the confidential folders she had found in his office. Each step she took had led her to one conclusion: Jeff had been lying and cheating to the company, stealing credit, and even mismanaging funds. Emily wasn't angry. She wasn't seeking revenge. She wasn't even going to shout or yell. She simply wanted the truth to be known. And the truth had to come out now. It was time to take a step forward and show everyone who she really was. Underscore 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 on. The meeting begins. The room was full. Executives were sitting at a long, polished conference table. Jeff sat at the head, trying to hold on to his confidence as he went over his notes one last time. The energy in the room was electric, the stakes higher than they had ever been before. "All right, everyone," Jeff began, standing in front of the room with a wide, confident grin. "Today, we're going to go over the financial plan for our new project. It's going to be a big one, and I think we all know how important it is." The room nodded in agreement, everyone looking to Jeff like he was the leader. He was the one with the answers, the one with the plan. Emily had taken a seat quietly at the back of the room. She was wearing a plain, simple outfit, the same one she always wore to work. She had sat there, watching and listening as Jeff presented his slides. But today, Emily wasn't just another silent face in the room. Today, she was ready to speak. Underscore 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 on. The moment of truth. Jeff clicked to the next slide in his presentation, confidently talking about numbers that were supposed to represent the company's future. "We've done all the calculations, and we're ready to move forward," he said. "This project is going to make us millions." But just then, the door to the conference room opened with a quiet creak. Everyone turned their heads to see who was entering. It was Emily. Her steps were calm, controlled, but every single person in the room couldn't help but notice her. She wasn't walking in with a folder of papers. She wasn't rushing or looking nervous. She wasn't trying to get anyone's attention yet. Somehow, all eyes were on her. Jeff's confident smile faded as he saw Emily walk toward the front. "What's she doing here?" Jeff thought. She wasn't supposed to be part of this meeting. But Emily wasn't interested in what Jeff thought. She walked to the table, still calm, still quiet. Then, without saying a word, she placed a folder in front of the entire group. Emily stood tall and spoke, her voice clear, but with a calm that held everyone's attention. "I think it's time you all learned the truth," she said, looking directly at Jeff. The room was silent. The executives exchanged confused glances. But Emily didn't care. This wasn't about them, this was about exposing the truth. She opened the folder slowly, revealing a set of papers that no one had seen before. The documents were detailed. There were emails from Jeff, secretly talking to other employees about skimming funds. There were reports that didn't match up with the actual numbers. The evidence was clear. Emily had gathered everything. Every lie, every deception Jeff had made. It was all right there. Then, Emily looked directly at Jeff, and her words cut through the tension like a knife. "Jeff Matthews," she said firmly. "You've been hiding the truth. You've been stealing credit and misusing the company's money. You're not the person you've made everyone believe you are." Jeff's moment of realization. Jeff's face turned pale. He started to stutter, trying to find the right words, trying to make it all go away. This isn't what you think," he shouted. I'm just trying to do what's best for the company. This is all a misunderstanding." But no one believed him. The evidence was too clear. The people in the room were no longer listening to Jeff. They were looking at him with disappointment, some with anger. Emily turned to the executives and continued, "I've been silent for too long. I've watched as Jeff took credit for my work, misled everyone, and disrespected everyone around him. But not anymore. The truth is out." Jeff stood frozen, unable to defend himself. The truth had been revealed. The lies he had built his career on were falling apart in front of his eyes. "You can't do this!" Jeff shouted, his voice breaking. "I'm the one who made this company what it is. You can't just throw me out." But it was too late. The executives exchanged final looks, and one of them, the CEO, stood up and nodded. "Jeff Matthews," he said. "We've been watching you for a while now. You've been misleading us, and we can't tolerate this kind of behavior any longer. Your time here is over." Jeff's face twisted with rage and disbelief. "This isn't over. I'll make sure you all regret this." But the CEO only nodded, and the security guards were called to escort Jeff out of the room. The room was quiet. The tension was finally gone. Emily had won. She had exposed the truth. She had shown everyone that she was not just a quiet, invisible worker. She was strong, smart, and capable. The executives looked at her with newfound respect. "Thank you, Emily," the CEO said. "You've saved this company from a disaster. We can't let people like Jeff run things. You've proven yourself today." Emily smiled quietly, nodding. She didn't need their praise. She had done what was right, and that was enough for her. As Jeff was escorted out of the building, Emily's colleagues looked at her with admiration. No one would ever underestimate her again. The aftermath of the reveal. The room had barely settled after Jeff's dramatic exit. The air was still thick with the shock of what had just happened. Emily stood there, watching everything unfold quietly, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She had done it. She had exposed the truth. She had stood up when others couldn't, when no one else dared to challenge Jeff's lies and manipulation. Emily had taken on the impossible task of going head-to-head with a man who had control over the company, a man who had built his reputation by stepping on others. And now, Jeff Matthews was gone. The man who once ruled over the office with arrogance and lies had been escorted out of the building, and there was nothing left for him to hold on to. But what did that mean for Emily? She stood alone at the front of the room, looking around at the other employees. The executives, who had just moments ago been sitting on the edge of their seats, waiting for Jeff's every word, were now looking at her. Their eyes were no longer full of doubt or judgment. They were full of respect. The CEO, Mr. Harris, was the first to break the silence. "Emily," he said, his voice steady but filled with admiration, "I want to thank you. What you did today was not easy. But you've shown all of us what true courage looks like." Emily didn't know what to say. She wasn't looking for praise. She wasn't looking for anything. She had only done what was right. I didn't do it for the praise," she replied softly, her voice humble. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. The truth was never about recognition, never about glory. It was always about what was right, and Emily had done what was right even when no one else believed she could. As the meeting went on, things started to feel different. The once icy and tense atmosphere began to thaw. The employees who had once whispered behind Emily's back, the ones who thought she was just another newbie, were now whispering about her for a different reason. They no longer saw the quiet, reserved woman who kept to herself. They saw someone strong, someone brave, and someone who had the truth on her side. As Emily walked back to her desk, she noticed the change. People who had never spoken to her before now looked at her with respect. Some even smiled and nodded in her direction. Emily wasn't looking for their attention, but it felt good to know that they had finally seen her for who she was. There was still a lot of work to do, and the company was far from perfect. But Emily had taken the first step. And she had done it with grace. As for Jeff Matthews, his consequences were swift and clear. Security had escorted him out of the building, but that wasn't the end of it. Word spread quickly through the office about what had happened. Jeff had tried to fight back, to yell and argue, but it didn't matter. The damage had been done. The executives had already made up their minds. They had reviewed the evidence Emily had gathered, and it was more than enough to prove Jeff's wrongdoings. His career, which had once seemed unstoppable, was now in ruins. Mr. Harris had made the difficult but necessary decision: Jeff Matthews was fired. Not just from his position, but from the company altogether. He would no longer be able to take credit for others' work or use his power to manipulate anyone. As the days went by, Emily saw the ripple effect of that decision. The company was changing. People began to speak out more openly, no longer afraid of Jeff's influence. They shared ideas without the fear of being pushed aside. They worked together, knowing that their voices mattered. But Jeff's legacy of dishonesty would haunt him. The scandal surrounding his firing reached the news. Soon, articles were published, and headlines screamed about how a man who had once been seen as untouchable was now the face of greed and corruption. His reputation crumbled. Jeff Matthews was no longer the powerful CEO he once was. Instead, he became an example of what happened when people let ambition cloud their morality. And for Emily, she became the living proof that no matter how small you seem, no matter how overlooked you are, truth and justice will always find a way. As the weeks passed, Emily felt a sense of peace that she had never experienced before. She had finally taken control of her own story. The quiet woman in the corner of the office was now the one who had exposed the lies, who had made the hard choices, and who had brought justice to the company. But there was more. Emily didn't want to be the center of attention. She didn't need to be. She had a job to do, and she was determined to do it well. The company had learned a valuable lesson about ethics, integrity, and the importance of standing up for what was right. And Emily had become an example of that lesson. She returned to her work with a renewed sense of purpose. She kept her head down, did her job, and continued to make a difference in ways no one had expected. But there was one thing that was clear: Emily was no longer invisible. Her colleagues began to approach her with ideas, questions, and even requests for advice. The people who once doubted her now respected her. They understood that Emily wasn't just another employee. She was a force to be reckoned with. And even though she didn't seek recognition, Emily was recognized for her strength, her intelligence, and her ability to do what others couldn't. The changes weren't just felt by Emily. The company itself was beginning to rebuild. Trust had been broken, but it was slowly being restored. People who once felt powerless now felt like their voices were heard. Employees were encouraged to speak up, share their concerns, and take responsibility for their work. With Jeff gone, the company was now in the hands of leaders who valued honesty and transparency. It wasn't an easy transition, but it was one that had to happen for the company to thrive again. As for Emily, she continued to work alongside her colleagues, now with a deeper understanding of how much power the truth could have. She had seen the damage that lies could cause. She had seen the destruction of trust and respect. But she also saw the beauty of standing up for what was right, even when no one thought she could. She had taken on the challenge, faced it head-on, and emerged victorious. Emily had reclaimed her power. She had earned the respect she deserved. One afternoon, as Emily sat in the break room, sipping her coffee, one of her colleagues came up to her. "Hey, Emily," he said with a smile. "I just wanted to thank you for everything you did. You saved this company, and honestly, we owe you a lot. I don't think we'd be where we are today if you hadn't spoken up." Emily smiled and nodded, but she didn't need thanks. She wasn't in it for the recognition. She was in it because she knew what was right. And sometimes, that's all that matters. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what was right," Emily replied. Her colleague looked at her with admiration, clearly impressed by her humility. But Emily didn't care about that either. She had already won. She had already proved that truth and justice were worth fighting for. As the days went on, the office continued to change. The whispers were no longer about Emily's quiet nature, or how she was the new girl. They were about how she had shown everyone that integrity was stronger than power. Emily's journey wasn't about glory, fame, or praise. It was about standing up when no one else would. It was about doing what was right even when it was hard. And in the end, justice had been served. The true strength lies in silence. Emily had never been the loudest person in the room. She wasn't the one who walked in with a booming voice, commanding attention. She wasn't the one who spoke over others, making sure everyone knew how important she was. No, Emily was different. She preferred to listen, to observe, and to think carefully before she spoke. At first, this was seen as a weakness. People thought she didn't have much to say. They thought she was just shy, just another face in the crowd. She wasn't the type of person who shouted or argued. But as time went on, people began to realize something that they had missed before. Emily's silence wasn't a sign of weakness, it was her greatest strength. While others were busy talking, trying to get noticed, Emily was watching, learning, and understanding the truth. And when the time came, when she had gathered all the pieces of the puzzle, she spoke. And when she spoke, everyone listened. Her calm and quiet nature had allowed her to see what others had missed. She had understood things that no one else had noticed. And when she finally revealed the truth, it wasn't just a surprise, it was a wake-up call. True strength, Emily had learned, was not about being the loudest or the most powerful. True strength came from within. It came from the ability to stay calm, to observe, and to act when the time was right. The journey Emily had taken wasn't easy. In fact, there were many times when she felt like giving up. The constant pressure from Jeff, the snide remarks, the whispers behind her back, they all weighed on her. It would have been so much easier to just stay quiet, to let things go, to continue doing her job and avoid conflict. But Emily didn't do that. She didn't back down. She didn't let fear stop her. Even when everyone around her seemed to doubt her, even when the odds were stacked against her, Emily pushed forward. Resilience, the ability to keep going, to keep fighting even when things are tough, was one of the most important qualities Emily had. She didn't let herself be defeated by her circumstances. She didn't let the opinions of others define her. She had a purpose, and she was determined to see it through, no matter what. Her story was one of strength, but it was also one of resilience. Emily showed everyone that even when things seem impossible, even when the world seems stacked against you, you can rise above. She proved that resilience is not about avoiding challenges, but about facing them head-on and growing stronger because of them. Emily's journey also taught everyone something else, the importance of standing up for what's right. It's easy to sit back and stay quiet when you see something wrong happening. It's easy to ignore the truth, to pretend you didn't see anything, to keep your head down and avoid trouble. But Emily chose a different path. She chose to stand up for what she knew was right. She didn't let fear or doubt stop her from speaking out. She didn't care that it was uncomfortable or risky. She cared about justice. She cared about truth. And in the end, that was what mattered. Sometimes, doing what's right isn't easy. It might mean standing alone. It might mean going against people who are powerful or respected. But Emily's story shows us that even in the face of fear, standing up for what's right is worth it. When you do what's right, you don't just change the situation, you change yourself. And you can change the world around you. For a long time, Emily had doubts about herself. She had been overlooked, underestimated, and pushed aside. It would have been easy for her to believe the negative things others said about her. It would have been easy to think she wasn't important, that she wasn't strong enough to make a difference. But Emily didn't believe those things. She didn't listen to the doubts. She believed in herself. She knew she had the power to make a difference, even when no one else did. And that belief in herself, even when no one else saw it, is what made her strong. It is what gave her the courage to stand up and do the right thing. Emily proved that when you believe in yourself, when you trust in your own abilities, you can do amazing things. You can face any challenge, rise above any obstacle, and change the world around you. As Emily's story spread, people began to realize something else, something powerful. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight every battle with loud words or big gestures. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm and quiet, to let your actions speak louder than words. Emily wasn't loud. She didn't try to be the center of attention. She wasn't the one who had to be in control. But when it was time for her to act, she did. And when she acted, the world noticed. Her story is a reminder that the quietest people often have the most powerful voices. It's not about being loud. It's about knowing when to speak and when to listen. It's about standing strong in the face of challenges and letting your actions define who you are. The power of quiet strength is often underestimated, but it can be the most impactful of all. In the end, Emily's journey was a testament to something simple but true: justice always prevails. No matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult the journey, the truth has a way of coming to the surface. When you stand up for what's right, when you do what's just, you might feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. You might feel like no one is listening, like the odds are against you. But in the end, justice has a way of finding its way through. It might take time, but it will always come. Emily's story shows us that we should never give up on justice. Even when the world feels unfair, even when we feel small, we have to keep fighting for what's right. Because in the end, justice will always win.